Welcome back, Your Lake Fork Guide Nation. We appreciate you joining us as always. Another episode of the Guides Network. You guys saw that video earlier this week. Me and my good buddy Joseph Leahy were whacking them on swim baits, and he was throwing the magical glide bait. So today on the Guides Network, I'm going to go in depth on how I go about catching fish and how Joseph was going about catching fish on glide baits. Alright guys, on the gear, the glide baits, the actual glide baits that I'm using, this one is beat all to heck and back. It's got hook rash, it's got tooth marks. I think the tail's about to fall off, it's a little loose. One of the eyes is coming off, but that's okay. That just means that bait's broke in real good and the fish love it. So this is the 6 inch flow glider. 6 inch flow glider, that's my day in, day out, everyday favorite glide bait. Gets the most bites out of all my glide baits by far. My favorite big glide bait is the HPH High Power Swim Bait Gliding Gizzard. Big profile bait, as you can see, much bigger than this other one. Just as you can obviously see, just a tremendous finish on that bait. That thing is handmade, hand tuned. He tests every one of them before he lets go of them to sell. So awesome bait, in my opinion. Out of all the big glide baits, by far the best action I found on a big profile glide bait. The way you get these is you get on Facebook and you go to fishatlantaguideservice.com and you message him. He'll give you the information. You send him some money, and then, you know, there's a long waiting list. It takes a long time to get these, but usually 10 months or so later, you'll get some glide baits, sometimes less, sometimes more. But it takes a long time to get them, but boy, are they worth it. That is a tremendous bait right there. Gliding Gizzard High Power Swim Baits. Fish Atlanta Guide Service on Facebook. Two more that I use, I just didn't have handy, that I want to tell you guys about. One is the Gancraft Jointed Claw. Both sizes, the smaller and the bigger sizes. Phenomenal bait. Another great one. A little bit different shape, a little bit different action, but a very, very good glide bait. And the fourth one is the River to Sea S-Waver. If you want to get in and kind of, you're on a budget, but you're curious about glide baits, buy the River to Sea S-Waver. The smaller one's only like 20 bucks. Even the big one is only like $45. Very good bait, does get bit. That's one thing about glide baits, guys. If you want to get into glide baits, you have to understand there is some absolute garbage on the market that cost a lot of money. There is many baits out there that are $200–300, some more, and they're junk. They're just, I mean, will they catch a fish sometimes? Probably, because they're big and they move through the water slow, and, you know, a dumb fish will jump up and eat it every once in a while. But to catch fish consistently, to learn how to fish a glide bait effectively, they do not have good action. They do not catch them consistently, and they're just a waste of your money when you could be spending, you know, these baits are real expensive. You could be spending hundreds of dollars on baits that actually work versus finding out their junk the hard way. So if you stick, and I'm not saying there's not other good brands out there, but if you stick to those four that I just mentioned, you'll know I put the Billy Lawson Your Lake Fork Guide stamp of approval on them, that they are good baits, quality baits with quality action that will catch fish. 6 inch flow glider, High Power Swim Baits Gliding Gizzard, River to Sea S-Waver, Gancraft Jointed Claw. Be sure and check all four of those out there. Good glide baits. Alright, rod, reel, and line setup. For my rod, you know, these are heavy baits. This one right here weighs like 2 3/4, almost 3 ounces, I think. This one right here is not so much. This one's 1 3/4 ounces, so it's not as heavy. But all these baits are heavy, so I like to use a 7-11 medium heavy rod. I want a long rod, but I still want a little bit of tip because of the treble hooks. Anytime I'm throwing a treble hooked lure, I want to make sure that I have a good amount of tip in that rod, forgiveness, kind of shock absorber, to help me keep that fish, you know, hooked up and pinned. Give me a little bit of forgiveness when I'm dealing with that, because treble hooks, you know how it is. For some reason, they tend to rip out of a fish's mouth. And when you're throwing something this heavy, it's even worse, because he's got a lot of leverage against all the weight that you have on that bait. As far as line, there's one line I use for every glide bait. That is the Lake Fork Tackle Fluoro Hybrid Pro. LFT, FHP, in 22 pound. It's a copolymer line, but it's, you know, very minimal stretch, closer to the stretch of a fluorocarbon, but it's a very, as you can see right here, see that line just going limp in the wind? Very limp, low memory type of line. Very, very strong line. The strongest line I've ever fished with non-braid. All right, so that's my gear. Areas. Let's talk about areas. Where do we fish a glide bait? You know, this week we were fishing it over a grass flat. A very expansive hydrilla flat is where we fish these baits, over the top of that scattered hydrilla. That is a very good place to fish it. Honestly, there's not a lot of wrong places to fish a glide bait. There's 3 things that I have to want to throw a glide bait. One is I got to have a large population of bass over 5 pounds. 2 is I got to have a large population of large profile bait fish. And the third is I got to have most of the fish in shallow water. By shallow water, I mean 10 feet or less. As long as most of the fish are 10 feet or less, I have big bass and big bait, then a glide bait is a great tool. If you got pretty good water clarity, it will usually get you some bites. And it's a great way, great technique to learn to try and target a trophy bass. You can catch the biggest bass of your life on baits like these. It's a very common thing on these big swim baits to catch giant bass, you know, 10 plus pound bass. You know, just to dial in a little more on the areas that you want to focus on, you know, maybe you're not in a lake that has a lot of grass. You know, expansive grass flats are always good. Anytime you have vegetation spreads out, you can fish those glide baits over the top of them. That is an A-plus place to fish them. But also wind-blown points. Like if you have a flat point that comes out shallow for a long way and there's wind blowing over it, great place to throw a glide bait. Wind helps, you know, as far as conditions. That's another thing I look for when deciding where to fish it. If it's a windy day, then I don't want to be, you know, in the water where it's calm. I'd want to go over here to the other side where the wind's blowing into that bank and causing that ripple and getting those bait fish stirred up. Wind definitely helps. Also, believe it or not, I know it's, you know, kind of against what the book says, but for swim baits, for all swim baits, including glide baits, I like sunshine. Water clarity is a big deal. They will track this bait down and follow it from a very long way. So the brighter it is, the further they can see that bait from, the further I can draw them in from. That means more fish I'm drawing to my bait, more chances I have to get bit. So honestly, sunshine with a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, fish the windy side, that is the absolute perfect conditions. That's where I want to go looking to throw a glide bait. Alright, that covers it for gear, that covers it for wear. So now let's get up and I'll show you guys how to retrieve these baits, and you need to pay very close attention. This is the most important part of this instructional video, is how you work these baits, because this is not a bait you throw out there and reel in and get a bite. You have to trigger strikes with these baits, so pay close attention. Alright, let's talk about how we go about drawing bites on these glide baits. First thing, like we said, these fish will come from a long ways off to hit this bait, so one of the most important factors is a very long cast. So we're always going to start with a very long cast, way on out there. My first retrieve that I'm going to use, kind of my standard retrieve I go to day in, day out when I start fishing a glide bait, I'm going to roll that bait. I'm going to get a little bit of an angle in my line, and I'm going to do a very slow roll. What you want to do is that glide bait, as you're reeling it back, if you reel it too slow, it'll just come straight at you. But if you reel it with just enough speed to make it walk in an S-curve, it wants to swim in an S-curve like this. So what I want to do is reel it just fast enough to get it going with that S-curve. And for each glide bait, you have to play with them and see what that speed is. Get it just slow enough, or just fast enough where it's walking back and side to side, S-curve swimming. And after about 6 to 7 cranks with my handle doing that, I'll hit it twice. 2 twitches, sharp twitches. What's happening is that glide bait's out there and it's walking, it's walking, it's walking. That fish is swimming behind it, looking at it, and it's just doing this, doing this. And then as he's behind it, staring at it, I'm gonna hit it, and that bait's gonna go, and it's gonna be right in his face. He's gonna have to stare it down, leave it, or bite it. And if you talk to somebody too much while you're doing it, you'll get grass on your bait. But that's my standard retrieve. Like I said, that thing's going back and forth, and that fish is sucking back in there behind it, staring at it, and he's drawing in closer to it. And as he's right behind it, you hit it twice, and it goes, whoop, whoop, and it turns and turns right back around, kind of in his face. And when it does that, it triggers a lot of strikes. That's a lot of times right when you're going to get bit. All right, retrieve number 2. So this one's when, you know, that's kind of my day in, day out. The fish aren't really that active. I'm just trying to draw a reaction bite from kind of a not so active fish. This next one is kind of the next step up, when the fish are biting pretty good, but maybe they're not just, you know, chasing bait on the surface and schooling, but they're chasing down baits, they're eating other moving baits, they're biting a spinner bait or a chatter bait or something like that. This is the one I want to go to. So I'm going to start out with that slow crawl, but I'm going to gradually speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up, and then I'm going to burn it about 4 or 5 cranks. What that does is that bait is, well, I'm talking about that duckweed is thick right there. All right, so what that does is that bait is swimming along, and again, the fish comes in behind it. You're starting out slow, and he gets behind it, and it's slowly speeding up, and he's slowly speeding up. And then when you rip it and burn it 5 cranks, it'll shoot up, and that fish will shoot up, and then when you stop it, that bait will turn around and look at him again. So now he's behind it, he speeds up, and all of a sudden it almost hits him in his face. Now that fish is either going to bite that bait, or he's going to bail out and leave altogether. And if he leaves altogether, you haven't lost anything, because all he was going to do was follow your bait to the boat anyway. He more than likely was never going to eat your bait. All right, last technique, and this is the one that Joseph was kind of using this in the video on Monday. Not quite so much, but he was basically doing this. But this, when you see the situation where these fish, there's a pod of them following your bait to the boat every time, that you see them actively chasing down bait and eating bait on the surface, almost schooling activity, this is what you want to go to. Long cast, and we're just going to walk it. We're going to sit there and literally just treat it like a spook. You got to jerk on it pretty hard because it's a big heavy bait, so you got to pull it harder than you do a spook. But you're just going to point your rod at a 45, and it can be up high to keep that bait up high, or you can go down low and let that bait get down a little bit. But you're literally, that bait is just walking, and every once in a while walk it and then just stop it and then go back to walking it, and 9 times out of 10 it'll be on your stop. That's when that fish will eat it. And as you can tell on every one of these retrieves, the time when I said that you're most likely to get bit is right at the biggest change of direction. When you stop it, when you pause it, when you glide it way out to one side or the other, that's when they bite it. So that's what I mean when I say this is not a bait that you just throw and get bit on. You have to work these baits. Now these retrieves we talked about, I'm doing them on the flow glider. They are glide bait wide. They work on all glide baits, all models, all sizes. So you can take that to whatever glide bait you're throwing, and you will use that and you will get bites. You just got to give it some patience. It's a big fish hunter. It's a big fish bait. Don't get too anxious. Be patient with it. Once you get a couple bites on it, you'll build confidence, and it will open some doors that you've never seen before. So guys, I hope that helps. Hope we were informative for you. Hope you got it down. Go out there and get you some of that side to side. Oh, wobble wobble right there. It will get you a big fish. Hey, check out a few more fish catches from Monday. We're going to show them to you again. Here they are right now.
Let's go! Yeah, I came up in the boat.
That's a good fish. Let's get a pretty awesome, right? You can tell Joseph was excited. I was excited. It was fast and furious action. It was incredible. Blessed day. So glad I got to share it with one of my favorite young guys on the water. And man, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did making it. I'll tell you what, we appreciate you watching Your Lake Fork Guide as always. And other than that, we will see you guys next time right here